Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Today on CityCast Portland, we're talking about a city councilor threatening to withhold funds for a Portland State University project, the city possibly repaying a local business owner for over $100,000 in sidewalk improvements, and the latest city audit tackling our crumbling infrastructure. Joining me on this week's Friday News Roundup are Oregonian City Hall reporter Shane Dixon Kavanaugh and our very own executive producer, John Notarianni. It's Friday, April 25th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Welcome, everyone, to the Friday News Roundup. Shane, John, thanks for hanging out with me this morning.
Good morning, Claudia.
Hooray!
Oh, the joy on Shane's face. For all of you new to the show, today is the day we break down some of the biggest local stories of the week with some of the best and brightest journalists in town. And I was going to say like Shane here, but I know whenever I do that, John's like, what about me?
No. Meaningful omission. Yeah.
Before we jump into the news, I usually ask an opening question so our listeners can get to know our guests a little better, but I'm going to take a quick detour to remind folks of the block party we can't stop talking about because we're throwing it for all of our listeners and Portland on May 3rd, aka 503 Day. So you can meet all of us here at CityCast Portland, possibly even Shane, from 1 p.m. to 6:03 p.m. on Southwest 3rd and Ankeny Alley in downtown Portland. And I gotta say, it feels a little shady asking people to meet me at an alley downtown, but I swear this is all above board no matter what Shane says, because Shane was actually here when we first announced that we were having this block party.
And I was asking the tough questions.
He was pretty skeptical. He was like, do you have permits? Does anyone know you're doing this? Do you need bell money? So the city knows we're throwing it, and I'm so happy to announce that members of City Council will actually be attending to proclaim 503 Day a totally real Portland holiday. So that's like an official from the mayor's office proclamation, Shane. That's how legit this thing now is.
Yeah, serious.
I'm not expecting an apology, but I'm just saying, editor's note, she wasn't lying. That's on top of the beer garden, food, music, live band karaoke, costume contest, and other special guests. So today's opening question is related to that fact that our little podcast somehow got the city to proclaim 503 Day a totally real holiday. So now I'm asking you two, what new Portland holiday should we try and make City Hall recognize? We're on a roll, right?
Bankers holiday on 505 so we can all sleep and not go to work.
Bankers?
And recover from 503 Day.
Did you say bankers?
Bankers holiday, yeah. So like you shut down business.
Oh, I've never heard of this.
Yeah, like President's Day, yada, yada. They're like bankers holidays because it's when the banks shut.
Oh, but it's like just for banks?
Am I getting this right, Shane? You have no idea what I'm talking about?
I mean, quite frankly, John and Claudia, I'm not going to do much better. I mean, my last name, Kavanaugh. I'm, Irish ancestry, and I'm a big St. Patrick's Day person. In fact, I will tell you that at our work, we get to have a couple of floating holidays every year, and I usually make March 17th a floating holiday for yours truly.
Oh, wow.
So maybe the city could consider that as well.
Like a for real Portland St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, we could dye the Willamette River green like they do to the Chicago River, right?
I like it. I really do.
You're also just trying not to hurt my feelings.
No. I love the idea of a green river, to be honest. I know that already people are like, no, but I'm like, that sounds hilarious.
Perhaps we could tie it into just the annual St. Patrick's Day fun run.
Just running and drinking beer. Well, thank you two so much for your answers. On to the news of the week. Shane, you're sharing a story you published actually this week. Like, what's the scoop?
So the story that I want to talk about with you all is one involving a new member of the Portland City Council, Mitch Green, one of 3 representatives for sort of the West Side District in Portland, which also includes a sliver of Sellwood and Eastmoreland. And I get yelled at every time I don't mention District 4 also includes that little sliver of Southeast Portland. But anyway, Councilor Green last week was at a student and professor rally at Portland State University talking about a wide range of issues that are impacting colleges and universities nationwide right now. One of the things that came up and that Councilor Green was talking about was last year's pro-Palestinian demonstrations and protests that occurred at PSU, including the multi-day occupation of the university's flagship library. And Councilor Green, in discussing this, brought up the fact that he believes that the university has taken disciplinary actions against some of the students who were believed to have been involved in the protests and demonstrations and the occupation. And from Mitch Green's perspective, he made it very clear that he wants to see the university essentially drop and remove any sort of school charges or sanctions against these students. Not just that, but he said explicitly, if the university did not do so, he was going to use his role on city council to essentially vote against some potential proposals that PSU would be bringing forth to the city council, primarily around this new PSU and City of Portland collaboration on creating an arts and culture center on the campus, including a performing arts venue. And Councilor Green said explicitly that he would vote against and work to have the council vote against providing any city funding for that project unless these charges were dropped.
I think this is an interesting tweak of a local leader finding a way to speak to broader issues in a way that we have not necessarily seen as much in recent years. And I say that because, obviously we've been deeply in conversations about, how national politics are affecting Oregon. But it feels like a lot of what the mayor has done, a lot of what the governor has done up to this point has sort of been we are not going to be impacted by pressure from outside. We are not going to deviate from what we think we should do based on what a federal administration is doing. And what I hear here is the echoes of what President Trump has been doing in sort of using funding to sort of push the social agenda that he believes is important upon institutions of higher learning. And it's interesting to see Mitch Green doing it from his perspective as well.
You know, the thing about this approach, though, that I find off-putting is that it still feels like someone is forcing somebody else to do something in the name of free speech, and none of it feels like free speech. I don't understand how this is part of free speech, because it's not just hey, I don't want these students punished or whatever, which, by the way, I was trying to find how exactly these students were punished, how many, and I couldn't really find the numbers.
Yeah, that was a great question. And I wasn't able to sort of get to the bottom of that in my reporting. I asked PSU about this, specifically. How many student conduct cases originated from the demonstrations and specifically the occupation at the library? Lo and behold, the university declined to disclose an actual number. However, subsequently, I did see that the PSU Vanguard, which is the student paper at the school, had a report from November that seemed to suggest and indicate, but again, the reporting was a little murky, that there were as many as 33 of these, cases opened up against students, not just with the occupation, but with other sort of pro-Palestinian political activism and demonstrations, and that 21 of those 33 students ended up facing, disciplinary action of some kind. In terms of the comments when Councilor Green made them, and hearing what PSU said afterwards, is that these cases have already been they've gone through the process and that they've been resolved.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Exactly, yeah.
At this point in time. So I'm not exactly sure.
What is he fighting for if all the cases have been resolved?
Yeah, but again, I feel that the university could also, provide a little bit more information, transparency, and context so we could understand the issue a little bit more.
Right.
They also happen to mention, if the threat was for the city council or Councilor Green to withhold funding from PSU on this project, which is in partnership with the city, Portland State also pointed out, at least from their perspective, any city money that would be going to the project would be going toward the city-owned piece of the project.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's really going to hit PSU where it hurts.
Exactly.
At least that's what they seem to be suggesting.
That's what I read from PSU's announcement. There was also an announcement of Mitch Green's people publishing it on the city website, basically going more into detail as to what he meant. And the biggest part that I saw was that he wanted them, aside from like erasing this from the students' permanent records or whatever, he also mentioned halting layoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, this to me was the biggest piece, which was like, well, here's what I'm seeing is the big part, is divesting from companies doing business with the Israeli military. That's what he ultimately wants PSU to stop doing.
In terms of the press release that Mitch Green's office sent out last night, first of all, it seems as though he wanted to sort of clarify that the protest issue was like one piece of several different policies that he's concerned about with regard to Portland State University. I'm not aware of him bringing up those issues during this rally last week, and the comments that he made specifically about the dropping the charges were tied to support for him on council with potential funding. That's what he was talking about, and that's what the crowd was erupting and cheering and applauding over. These other things, certainly he might have, feelings about them, and he's stating them and making it clear that there are a number of issues that PSU is confronting that he has a position on.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other component to this that at least, elicited a pretty strong reaction from readers after the story came out, and we certainly included this context in the piece, is this whole idea of the occupation of the library itself. What component of that is civil disobedience? What component of that is free speech? And what component of it was vandalism and destruction, right? The library was destroyed during this occupation. It cost PSU over $1 million to fix and renovate. And more importantly, I think, the library itself was shut down for 5 months. I think that, those are sort of the other questions to kind of wrestle with, in terms of trade-offs. And also, when does civil disobedience or free speech turn into criminal activity?
Right.
And that also harms and impacts potentially many other students on campus.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for the story, Shane. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, more headlines of the week. If you're a home DIYer like me, you might have a few leftover paint cans gathering dust in your basement. Or maybe your house already came with a bunch of them like mine did. So I'm happy to share that Paint Care makes recycling your leftover paint, stain, and varnish simple and easy with convenient drop-off locations as close as your local hardware store. Paint Care has 3 simple rules for painting smarter. 1, buy the right amount of paint for the job. 2, use up leftover paint. And 3, recycle the rest. If you visit paintcare.org/3simplerules, you'll find tips on how to do all 3. Buying the right amount of paint for your project, exploring DIY ideas for how to use up leftover paint, and also just look up the nearest drop-off site in your neighborhood. Paint Care is all about keeping it simple for Oregonians.
So here's a tip. The number one thing that your mom probably wants is a phone call from you. So this Mother's Day, you can give her a phone call, of course, and give her an Aura digital picture frame. So my mom lives across the country, and a big way that we keep in touch is through sharing photographs. I'm constantly sending her photos of activities that I'm doing, like my team at the Lads 500 bike relay the other week. Yeah, she got those photos. Aura Frames was named the best digital photo frame by Wirecutter, so you can use one to keep in touch with your mom too, right from your phone. Aura has a great deal going for Mother's Day. For a limited time, CityCast listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off plus free shipping on their best-selling Carver mat frame. That's auraframes.com. Promo code CityCast. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, I'm sharing the outcome of a year-long investigation by K2 news reporter Reich Gazaway. He learned of a small North Portland business being forced by the city of Portland to improve their building's sidewalks before being allowed to get these renovation permits that they applied for. And this is all despite the improvements that they required being included in an upcoming state-funded project by ODOT. And it was something that the city had known about. So Cammie Price and her partner had bought this rundown building in late 2018 and applied for renovation permits. It's right on the corner on Lombard by that Goodwill, if you're familiar with that area. And the Portland Bureau of Transportation, or PBOT, basically said, hey, you need to update not only the street corner curb to make it ADA accessible, which feels a little out of scope for someone who's my business is here, the corner is there, I have to make that corner ADA accessible. They were also you have to put a street light and you have to just stuff that we're isn't that what the city does, So she did it. Her and her business partner spent something over $100,000 and took on debt. But then it was found out that there was just no need for Cammie to pay for it. It had already been on ODOT's docket to improve that area. And as of today, the city has not made any indication that they're going to pay Cammie back. This story garnered so much attention that it actually prompted the Oregon House to recently pass a bill to prevent this kind of thing from happening to anyone else. And in a public hearing on that bill, lawmakers asked the city of Portland to pay Cammie back. But before I share what Mayor Keith Wilson has said about the matter, what do you guys think?
I mean, should the city take care of this? I mean, if you look at the law, no, right? If you actually get into city code, the owners of land abutting any street in Portland are responsible for constructing, reconstructing, maintaining, and repairing the sidewalks, curbs, driveways, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, it is on the property owner to do this sort of thing, which is crazy. And, this is what we did our 4th episode of this show about, Claudia, way back in the day, is this sort of weird quirk of Portland law. But it turns out yeah, it is the property owner's responsibility.
I think the point missing here, though, is that because Lombard is considered not a state highway.
No, it is. It's
a state highway.
Oregon Department of Transportation owns and maintains and is responsible for
for Lombard. So they're actually the ones who are looking into all those improvements. It's that overlap of what the city says the business owner should do and what the state is actually, that's our responsibility. So I think that's the crux of this. Why is the city forcing property owners to pay for something if the state's no, we got that?
I think the other sort of small but significant piece here to this overall story is on the requirement specifically that the property owner had to pay for the upgrades of the sidewalk curbs to basically make them ADA accessible.
Exactly.
So this ties into a larger issue. I mean, the city of Portland was sued in 2018 because it had historically failed to create curb corners that met ADA standards. And now they're under a requirement to install or upgrade 1,500 curbs in Portland every single year, which costs a significant amount of money. ODOT is also required to do this work as well. Really friggin' expensive to do. I was reporting on this last week, that it can cost up to $60,000 to upgrade a single street corner curb. And you do that on scale, we're talking boatloads of money that neither ODOT or PBOT really has at the moment. So it sort of makes sense to try to get property owners to take on as much of this as possible.
Yeah, the city always knew that ODOT had it on their docket. Basically, there's this email conversation that Gazaway was able to grab where basically the city said, hey, we got the business owner to pay for it. Do you want us to take it off your list? And ODOT was like, sure. So Gazaway pretty much ambushed Mayor Keith Wilson at City Hall.
Was he hiding in some bushes?
He just walked in. He walked into City Hall and he waited for Mayor Keith Wilson to walk out from one meeting to another meeting. And by the way, cool Keith.
Cool Keith?
Just super cool under pressure. And he agreed. He's like, yeah, the city should have discussions about paying Cammie back.
Wow.
But insisted this was a matter between PBOT and ODOT to work out. He's like, my name is Paul, and this is between y'all. The mayor also said the city needs to make it easier for people to do business and develop the city. Like this, it's clear these business owners wanted to make something happen, and we shouldn't be getting in that way. And as of this Monday, a spokesperson for the mayor's office said Mayor Wilson is exploring possible resolutions to this issue in coordination with ODOT and is committed to provide an update as soon as more information becomes available. I looked this morning, no information has become available. So, I mean, hopefully Cammie gets paid back, but this just feels like weird.
Yeah. In that case, I am on board with the idea that this developer shouldn't have had to pay for this. And I'm glad that there's like a narrow resolution there. But I do think the elephant in the room is still the bigger law that is just anytime it comes up is crazy to me. And I think is crazy to like pretty much anybody that's like, wait, I have to pay for my own sidewalk?
And John, I completely agree, because I don't know, Shane, if you've heard anecdotal stories of this, but I've known so many people who have not been able to expand their business, build new businesses, do this kind of thing because they can't afford those renovations. And that to me is like, oh, cool, now we have an empty storefront.
There's also the fact that, developers pay what's called service development charges, SDCs, and it's a significant amount of money that's supposed to go to all of the infrastructure bureaus for precisely this type of work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought up infrastructure and Portland in the same sentence. We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, John's got a doozy for us.
What sort of promises have you made to yourself this year? Getting in better shape, eating healthier, saving more money, traveling somewhere new? What about discovering a new culture by learning a new language? With Babbel, you can do that in just a few weeks. I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons, handcrafted by over 200 language experts, get you to begin speaking your new language in 3 weeks or whatever pace you choose. And because conversing is the key to really understanding each other in new languages, Babbel is designed using practical, real-world conversations. The Spanish I learned on Babbel really helped me on a recent trip to Mexico City, ordering in restaurants, shopping at the textile market, cheering on at the Lucha Libre, and I've been keeping it up since I got home. You're a podcast listener. I know that because you're listening here. I bet you'll love Babbel's new podcasts. On Eavesdrop in Espanol, which I listen to, you get to listen to a real conversation, then have the teacher host explain back to you. Then you listen again and catch everything. And you can even read along in the transcript. It's a really fun and effective way to learn. Let's get more of you talking in a new language. Babbel is gifting CityCast listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Babbel.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Hey, CityCast. According to me and my calculator, you will spend more time this week between the sheets than you will at work. So upgrade your sheets to Cozy Earth. Luxury starts where you rest. I start my evening in buttery soft Cozy Earth bamboo pajamas. Then I dip into a Cozy Earth bamboo sheet set. They are silky and temperature regulating. Forget the 9 to 5. Prioritize your 5 to 9. Cozy Earth products will transform those hours into a sanctuary. And they take comfort seriously with a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty. Luxury should not be out of reach, so Cozy Earth is giving CityCast listeners 40% off their best-selling sheets, towels, pajamas, and more. Visit CozyEarth.com and use the code CozyPortland for 40% off, because you deserve a great night's sleep, and sanctuary awaits at Cozy Earth.
All right, John, bring us up to speed with the latest audit.
All right. Previously on CityCast Portland, $100,000 sidewalk. What about $1.4 billion deficit in infrastructure spending?
That's per year.
Per year.
That's per year.
Yeah. So they did some calculations of like how much stuff Portland owns and has to maintain. $74 billion worth of sidewalks and sewers and pipes and parks and yada yada. $74 billion. And there's been this growing backlog over years and years of just maintenance not being done because a lot of this stuff was built in like the 1950s and is starting to crumble. In 2019, the gap of funding for stuff that needed to be fixed but wasn't was $475 million. It's now up to $1.4 billion a year as of 2023. And this is dangerous for like very obvious reasons. If our stuff is crumbling, it is dangerous for people. It becomes more expensive to fix. And of course, low income and historically underserved communities bear the brunt of that. Well, in steps Portland City Auditor Simone Reddy, who just put out this big report saying we need a plan and we need to get going on it like right away. Reddy is proposing creating a citywide asset management strategy, which sounds sort of jargony, but what it is like, we need a plan to figure out what to do with all this crumbling shit and to actually fix it and to like have somebody be in charge of that and to get it done. So the idea is that the city administrator, Michael Jordan, is going to be tasked with just sort of taking stock of all of this stuff and putting together a citywide plan and getting buy-in from the public because, as we're discussing, this stuff isn't cheap.
So what you're saying, John, the takeaway here is we've got a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure backlog that has been due to years of neglect by city bureaus and city politicians. And the proposed solution here is for Portland to spend 2 years to come up with a plan to address this.
I would like to give you a direct quote, Shane. Quote, "It should dedicate time and resources to creating the infrastructure for infrastructure."
Yes, I remember that one. I was like, I know the audit office was just like, yeah, fucking idiots. And then they deleted that part. So I was looking to see how many asset management audits the city had done. And I found reports dating all the way back to 2007. And then when I read through that 2007 report, it stated that it was the 5th annual report, meaning the first audit into our city's asset management, like officially. Maybe it was called something else or whatever. Could have been as early as 2002. So that's 23 years of someone at the city, many people at the city being like, hey, we should take note of our crumbling infrastructure. So that made me wonder, like, how 23 years of alarm ringing at a city accomplished almost nothing. And then, of course, I read the next part, which, John, I'm sure you're very eager to share.
Yeah, I mean, basically what the report said was we've been in this bureau system, right? Where there's this bureau, there's that bureau. Each is sort of responsible for its own infrastructure. So like if one department falls behind, there's nothing that is being done at a city level to like coordinate it. So there's been all these little silos of different bureaus within the city. And only now in like our great year of 2025 are we in a position where we can really put together a comprehensive plan, because that just didn't exist with the old city government.
Yeah, but irrespective of the comprehensive plan, I think what is being highlighted here too is bureaus are responsible for their infrastructure, whether it's PBOT or parks, and those are two great offenders with just a complete lack of maintenance.
Yeah.
They were responsible for maintaining their assets prior to coming up with a grand city plan, and they just didn't do it.
Yeah.
What also comes through in this audit too is just there is the siloed, dysfunctional commission form of government that we had, but also asset management is not a politically sexy topic. Politicians and bureaus are much more comfortable with going to ribbon cuttings. Look what happened with Columbia Pool in North Portland, as an example.
Well, I mean, you just said it. I mean, it's either, hey, prioritize the really boring stuff of like making sure the street is here for 10 years or something shiny and new. And I mean, like, if left up to politicians who were heading these bureaus, they're going to pick the thing that's going to get them reelected. And you can't really show, hey, there's not that many potholes here now. That's not going to drive people to like want to vote for you again, which is unfortunate because that should be what we're voting for. Olivia Clark, city councilor for District 4, she was like, we have an adult in the room.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We have a city administrator. We now are able to essentially take these parts of the city infrastructure, the way the city works, and make it not political, not a bureau's responsibility, which I agree, Shane. They should have taken care of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, like to that point, something that the audit does point out, and this is also a direct quote, several city employees told us that the city's asset management challenges seem too overwhelming to address. Instead of taking incremental steps, city leaders have tended to ignore the problems.
Oh, man.
So on one hand, it's all these little fiefdoms. On the other hand, it's just gotten to a point where no bureau felt like they could get their arms around the whole problem. So it just kept getting kicked down the road. And like we said, now we have an adult in the room. Now we have somebody who's like actually able to look at all this from a 1,000-foot view. And maybe we can get some motion on this stuff in a way that we haven't been able to for literally decades.
Yeah. So that way the bureaus aren't fighting for funding to not only do whatever it is that they want to do, but also like keep up the infrastructure.
Yeah, but as this report highlights, the cost of inaction is astronomical.
Yeah.
And you get to a certain point where when you get into poor or failing mode for your assets, you know, all of a sudden the cost isn't going up a couple of $100 million a year. It's going up $1 billion a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is this exponential growth curve. So that's the question for me is, how do we actually address an asset maintenance backlog that is $1 billion a year? And they do this on a 10-year timeline. So we're talking about $10 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you pay for that?
Yeah. I mean, that is the big question. Like, where does the money come from? And I think that's going to be a really tricky needle to thread. And the report says several times that like a big part of this is getting community buy-in, being really transparent, communicating the necessity of this, which, like, I think for anyone in Portland is going to be a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah. Actually, the community buy-in part was interesting to read because bringing back Councilor Olivia Clark, she was like, we're going to have to raise property taxes. She's like, there's just no way around it. We're going to have to raise property taxes. It's very clear nobody wants it. And like, she's like, maybe once we show people that, she didn't say this is me saying once we show people we're responsible with money.
Yeah.
Once people start seeing the return of all of the money they're already spending, maybe they'll be into spending more, is what she said.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you guys, thanks so much for hanging out and going through some headlines of the week. Shane, I'm really excited to see you, hopefully in person on 503 Day in that alley.
Bring your knife.
Yeah, just you and me in that alley. But thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Same to you.
Thanks, Claudia.
Thanks.
That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thank you so much for listening. Our podcast production team this week was John Notarianni, Julia Fiaioni, Patrick Emile, and Lizzie Goldsmith. Our Hey Portland newsletter editor is Rachel Monahan, and our host is me, Claudia Meza. Original music by Jenny Conley and Stephen Drizos. Additional music by All the Kimonos, as well as Sarah the Instrumentalist, Timothy Infinite, and Gregory David, courtesy of Epidemic Sound. We'll be back Monday morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.